The desert winds blew across the dead crater on the red world, called Zales Prime, and nothing ever changed. Here not the heat, not the dust, not the silence around the ancient ship that had stood in the same place for over 300 years. Ship had no name, no one had ever earned the right to name it. It was black and silver, its surface smooth like glass, but strong like stone. Strange lines ran across it, glowing sometimes, like it was a Levalian. After Alien came to this crater, they all wanted the same thing. To fly the ship. Some came from powerful empires, others from pirate clans or noble houses. They brought translators, tech priests, memory readers, even singing crystals to wake the ship. None of it worked. The ship stayed silent, cold, dark, until someone touched it. Then it hummed for a moment, then burned them, or threw them back, or made them scream without sound, and fall into sleep with open eyes that never blinked again. They called it cursed. The ship that hated all, the ship that belonged to no one. Tira stood at the edge of the crater, her skin pale blue, her robes tight around her shoulders, as wind and sand bit at her face. She watched another crew being dragged out of the crater, eyes wide-skin, smoking their leader, muttering the same words all the others had said before. It hates Uskri. Was young for a historian, but her curiosity burned stronger than her fear. She had read all the records, she had watched the old halas of failed attempts. She had heard the songs of the temple moons and the silence between them. Then she saw something strange. Jay's new figure walked down the crater slope. His steps unsure but steady, his body tall and thin, his face strange to her, 2 eyes short, hair pale skin. Human. Tira's people said humans were wild. They came from a broken world. They were small in number, but they did not fear the void. They flew into danger and fought like cornered beasts. They were not welcome in most high courts, but they were known for surviving what others could not. The human's name was Jace. She had seen him once before at the border, post his ship old and scratched his gear. Simple, but clean. His eyes sharp but tired now. He stood near the ancient ship. The guards called out. They told him to step back. They warned him of what would happen, but he did not listen. He kept walking. Then the ship made a sound. It was soft like wind in the trees or breath before sleep, a low hum that made the ground tremble. The glowing lines on the ship flickered once, then again, and the air shimmered around him. Everyone stopped and stared. Tira stepped forward, her voice caught in her throat. She saw the ship blink, not with eyes, but with light. It looked at him. It saw him. Jace lifted his hand and touched the smooth hull, and the ship glowed bright, not hot, not angry, just alive. No scream, no fire, no blast of energy, just light. Tira ran to him, but the guards held her back. The council called for weapons. They feared what they did not understand. They feared the human and the ship together, but she could not look away. For the first time in her life, the ancient ship did not hate it. Hummed it, glowed, it accepted his touch. Jace turned his head slowly, his face calm but confused. He looked at her and spoke. What is this place? Tira could not speak. She could only stare, as the ship slowly opened a doorway, just wide enough for one human to walk through. The air changed. The silence broke. The ancient ship had chosen. The human did not know what he had started, but the galaxy would never be the same again. Night fell over Zales Prime, and the desert winds screamed louder than before, as if they knew something had awakened, something old, something dangerous, something not meant for this time. Tira sat alone on the edge of her outpost, high above the dead crater, her hands cold, her heart racing. She could not forget what she saw. She could not explain what she felt when the ship opened its doorway, only for the work human. The council had locked the crater down. After the event, they ordered Jace to be taken in for study, but the guards never found him. He had vanished into the ship, and the ship had closed again, as if swallowing him like a secret. Tira knew they would not listen to her. They called her young. They called her foolish. They said she was bewitched by the human, but she knew what she saw that ship wanted. So under the cover of darkness, she returned to the crater. She moved like a shadow, her cloak tight, her feet careful, her eyes fixed on the ship that now pulsed with a soft blue light like it was breathing. Then a voice echoed from behind. You came back. It was Jesse. Stood barefoot in the sand, his clothes dusty, his face calm but changed. His eyes, no longer confused, they were focused, glowing faintly, with the same color as the ship. Tira ran to him, her voice trembling as she asked, "What happened? What did the ship do to you?" Jace looked up at the ship and said, "It showed me things, not in words, not in images, but in feelings. It opened something inside me." Tira stared at him, then looked at the ship and whispered, "Can you open it again?" He nodded with a slow breath. Jace walked forward. He placed his hand on the same spot, and the doorway opened again without a sound. Tira followed him. Inside this time, the air shifted as she crossed the threshold. Her body tingled as if the ship was scanning every part of her. The walls glowed around them, but they did not burn. Inside was no cockpit, no wires, no controls, just a long hallway that felt alive. The walls pulsed, like veins glowing with soft blue light. The floor was smooth and warm under their steps, and the silence was not empty. It was deep, full, like the ship was listening at. The center was the career-round chamber filled with floating shapes, glowing symbols, and strange currents that moved through the air like smoke. Jace stepped forward, and the room reacted. Lines of light spun around him. The symbols moved and joined into patterns. Tira watched with wide eyes. She had never seen tech like this, not even in the ancient vaults of the high temples. This was older. This was built with thought, not tools. Then the ship spoke, not in sound, but in feeling. It reached into her mind and poured warmth and fear and memory. She saw stars she had never known. She saw machines building worlds and then burning them. She saw a race that looked almost human, but not quite. Their eyes brighter, their minds sharper, and then she saw them fall. The ship told her one thing: it had waited for the blood to return. Just turned to her, his voice quiet but firm. It says, I am not the first. I am a branch of what was lost. Tira trembled. This was not just a ship. This was a relic of something bigger, something older than any empire. Suddenly alarms rang outside. The council had sent drones. They hovered above the crater, ready to destroy the ship. Tira shouted, we have to go. They will fire without warning. Jace looked at the core, then placed his hand on the platforms. A ship closed around them, braced for heat or pain or noise, but felt none of it. Instead, the ship rose. The walls became clear, showing them the outside. As the ground shrank below, Tira gasped. They were flying. The drones moved in fast, their weapons charged. Just asked the ship, can you protect us? The ship answered by shifting its shape. Wings unfolded from nowhere. Armor grew from air and light, wrapped them like a shield. The first shot came but never reached them. It hit a wall of invisible force that bent and swallowed the energy. Grabbed Jace's arm, her voice shaking. What are you? He looked at her and said, I am human, but I am also part of something lost, something this ship remembers. The ship moved faster than anything she had flown before. It danced through the sky with grace and purpose, and all Tira could think was one question: what would the galaxy do when they learned a human had awakened the ship that hated all? Stars stretched across the sky as the ship climbed higher through Zali's primes. Thin clouds, the engines, made no sound, but the air around them shimmered like heat waves. In winter, Tira stood beside Jace in the glowing chamber, her breath tight, her thoughts racing. The ship was not just flying, it was alive. She felt it, she heard it inside her mind, like a whisper without words, like a feeling that wrapped around her bones. The ship showed Jace more visions, more memories, more truths from a time before any written history. He saw tall beings with bright skin and burning eyes building cities in space, forming planets from dust, speaking through light and emotion. They flew ships like this one, made not from metal, but from memory, from thought, from living crystal shaped by will. They seeded stars with life-guided early worlds, then vanished when something darker came, something that swallowed stars and cracked moons with thought. Alone the ship had fought that thing and lost. It fell and waited. It searched the stars for one with the spark, and then it found Earth. Jace blinked, the visions fading, his hands shaking. He turned to Tira and said, I think I was never meant to find this. I think it was meant to find me. Tira touched the glowing wall and asked softly, why him? Why a human? The ship answered again, not with words but with warmth, because humans forgot where they came from. And in forgetting they became something new, something dangerous, and something pure. The ship dipped low above a mountain range, and for a moment its reflection danced on the glassy rocks. Below, Tira could see drones and alien ships rising to meet them. The council had declared the ship too dangerous. They had called for its destruction. She asked Jace, what now? He said, I learned to fly it before they destroy us. The ship moved like thought, like instinct. When Jace leaned, it turned. When he raised a hand, the weapons unfolded from light and mist. He did not know how he knew, he just did. Below, the council's fighters formed a line, each ship a different color and shape. Some fired warning shots, others locked weapons and waited for the order. Though ship paused like a beast, watching prey. Jace reached out and felt the tension. He felt the ship ask if he would strike. First he shook his head and said, only if they try to kill us. The ship agreed. A warning shot came too close. It clipped the wing and made the energy ripple like glass underwater. Ship did not dodge it. Tira fell into a seat that formed beneath her as the ship flipped, rolled, spun around the incoming fire, and flew straight through the enemy formation, without hitting a single ship. The enemy pilots scrambled, some chased, some fled. The ship spun again, leaving streaks of blue light in the air, as if painting its story across the sky. Then something deeper woke inside the ship. A second chamber opened behind them, filled with symbols that hovered in the air and shifted like stars, forming a map of systems no one had seen before. Day stepped into it, and the ship dimmed everything else, and showed him a world locked in shadow. A voice came through now. Sharp, now full, now relay voice, like thunder hidden under snow. Said the Dark One stirs, the stars blink in fear, and the seal is weak. Turned to Tira, his voice dry, something is coming, and this ship was made to stop it. She looked into his eyes and saw more than a man, more than a pilot. She saw someone the galaxy would fear, or follow. The ship slowed, then dropped like a stone toward. The sand alarms on the alien ships screamed, but no one could keep up. The ancient ship touched down in a hidden canyon walls, high enough to hide them from orbit. Jace collapsed to the floor, breathing hard. The ship had taken his strength, and given him truth. Tira knelt beside him, her voice soft. Why does it trust you? He looked up with tired eyes and said, maybe it remembers who we used to be. Maybe it thinks I can be that again. In the silence that followed, only the hum of the living walls spoke, and outside above the canyon, clouds began to swirl as if the sky itself had started watching them. The canyon walls stood tall and silent, holding the ancient ship in shadow as Terra walked its glowing halls, her fingers brushing the smooth walls that pulsed like veins of light. The air inside was cool and soft, but carried a strange weight like a dream. Not yet spoken. Jace sat near the center of the ship, eyes closed, hands resting on his knees. He was breathing deep and slow, the ship's lights rising and falling with his rhythm, as if syncing with his pulse. Tira knelt beside him, her voice gentle. You look like you have not slept in days. He smiled weakly and said, the ship speaks in waves, in thoughts, in things I do not understand, but I feel them. I feel what it wants, I feel what it fears. She asked, what does it fear? He opened his eyes and said, it fears silence. Before she could ask what he meant, the walls around them brightened, and the ship stirred again, its hum rising like a giant waking from deep sleep. The platform they stood on began to shift, rising slowly, as if lifting them through the bones of the ship above them. The roof opened like petals of a flower, revealing the sky now dark and filled with stars. Tira could see ships in orbit, blinking lights moving in strange patterns, not friendly, not slow. The council had sent Morijachi stood tall now, stronger than before, his hand glowing faintly with lines of light that ran up his arm like roots or fire. The ship wrapped around him, forming a chair of energy, and thought it held him like a throne, and lit up with runes older than any language. She knew. Tira found herself in a smaller chair beside him, shaped for her, like it had known she would be there. The ship spoke again, not in sound but through feeling, and thought it asked Jace a question, not with words but with a door. He nodded and said yes. The engines woke with no fire, no heat, just pressure and light. The ship lifted smooth and silent as if pulled by strings. No one could see. Tira gasped as they rose past the canyon edge straight into the sky. Jace reached forward, fingers spread, and the stars ahead shimmered. The ship moved like thought, no delay, no drag. It bent around the world and launched upward in moments. They passed into space above Zali's prime, its red surface glowing below like a cracked ember. The enemy ships waited, but they did not fire yet. They formed a wall, a warning. Akage just spoke softly to the ship, not in words but in trust, and the ship answered with motion. It darted left, then right, then shot forward. Before the council ships could react, one fired a plasma net, bright and wide, like a trap in the void. The ancient ship twisted, then folded space around it, skipping past the trap like a stone over water. Tira held her breath as they spun between enemy cruisers, closer than safety allowed, but the ship flew with grace. Then one ship fired again, a bold move that lit up the stars. The ancient ship changed its surface, shifted into armor. Not solid but alive, it rippled with power and memory. Weapons formed from light and shadow, not to kill but to blind, to block, to stop. Jace raised his hand, and the ship pulsed once. A wave of invisible force spread out, and every enemy ship froze, not broken, just paused, held by something old. The ship spoke again to Jace, this time showing him something new. It revealed a system far away, a star burning dark, a planet that whispered. Tira saw it too, and felt cold inside. Jace said, we have to go there. The ship says it is waking. She asked, what is waking? He said, the thing it was built to stop, the thing that broke the sky long ago. As they flew faster than light, the stars around them stretched, and the ship began to sing. Not with sound, but with feel. Closed her eyes and listened. She felt sorrow. She felt hope. She felt the memory of a galaxy that once believed in light. And she felt the fear of what would happen if the light failed again. The ship flew forward, not just through space, but through time, through memory, through Fatan. Jace, now more than just a man, held the path in his hands, as if the stars had trusted him with their last breath. The stars ahead burned brighter as the ancient ship raced through space faster than any craft ever built, leaving behind the red world of Zali's prime and the stunned fleet that watched the impossible become real. Jace sat in the command seat, his hands open, his eyes closed, feeling the ship move through him. As much as he moved through it, they were not separate. Anymore, not pilot and machine, but one thought in motion. Tira sat beside him, watching the stars stretch like rivers of silver, the map before them glowing with points of light and shadow systems. She did not recognize places erased from common charts. She asked, "Where are we going?" Jace answered in a voice deep and steady, "The ship is not taking us somewhere safe, it is taking us where the danger sleeps." Before she could ask what that meant, the ship slowed. Just outside a small system, a cold sun at its center, and one world locked in shadow. The planet below had no lights, no cities, no signs of life, only thick black clouds that wrapped around it like a shroud. Tira looked at it and shivered, her voice quiet. "That place is dead." The ship responded with a hum that shook the chamber. "Not dead, not yet." Suddenly, alarms pulsed around them, shapes moved in the dark clouds below. Not ships, not life, not machines, but something between. The ancient ship lit up, forming shields that moved like waves of water flowing over its surface. The enemy came fast, strange figures of metal and gas, with no clear shape, like broken thoughts wearing armor. They swarmed from the planet like wasps from a dying nest. Tira gripped her seat, her breath tight, as the first wave charged. Aegis opened his eyes and let the ship move. It spun faster than thought, dove into the cloud of enemies, and weaved between them like a spark through smoke. The enemy struck, but never landed. Every blast curved away, every claw missed by inches, as if the ship knew the attacks before they were made. Jace was not piloting, he was guiding like wind guides fire. The ship fought, not with weapons but with patterns. It sent pulses that shattered the enemy forms, not into wreckage, but into light. Tira saw it all in silence. The ship that had waited for so long now danced through battle like a mind at war. More enemies rose from the planet, but the ship kept moving, kept dodging, kept disabling without killing. Jace's eyes glowed brighter with each turn, with each strike, with each whisper from the ship. Then the ship paused. It stopped in orbit over the planet and opened a deep view into its core, revealing tunnels of energy moving far beneath the clouds. Tira saw it to something big, something pulsing, something waking. Jace said, "This is not just a planet, this is a cage." Tira felt her heart stop. The enemy was not trying to destroy them, it was trying to keep them from reaching the surface. Jace asked the ship, "Can we land?" The ship answered by diving straight into the storm. They fell through thick clouds, through wind that screamed, through lightning that tore sideways, through strange colors that had no names. Tira held her breath as the world below grew clearer. Dark towers, broken bridges, rivers of ash and bone. Then the ship slowed and hovered over a great pit in the ground, miles wide, carved like a stood, and the ship opened a side chamber, deep and round, with walls that moved like breath. In the center was a sphere of light, pulsing with a strange rhythm. The ship said, "This is the last lock. If it breaks, the one below walks." Tira asked, "What is the one below?" Jace said, "Something the ship fought before, something that tried to rewrite the stars." Suddenly, a blast shook the ship. One enemy had followed, cloaked and hidden. It struck again and again, breaking pieces of light off the shield. Tira looked at Jace and said, "We cannot fight it forever." Jace looked back and said, "We do not have to fight, we have to seal." He walked to the sphere, placed his hand upon it, and everything stopped. The air, the sound, the movement. The ship took that moment and did something no one had seen before. It turned itself into light, pure thought, a mind without body, and it burned through the enemy like fire, through dry sky. Tira cried out as the ship vanished for one breath, then returned whole. Jace stood still, but now glowing, not just his skin, but something inside him. He said, "The lock is safe for now, but we have only delayed what waits." Billowed. "The galaxy still does not know what is coming through the cracks in the stars." Asterisk. The ship hovered in silence above the massive pit that glowed faintly in the dark storm. The world below them felt wrong, not just dead, but forgotten, erased, sealed away by something older than memory. Tira stood by the clear viewing wall, her eyes locked on the endless spiral of ruins and broken towers that circled the pit like shadows reaching toward the past. Jace remained still, his hands resting on the panel of light before him, the glow from his veins now brighter than before, spreading up his arms across his neck down to his fingertips, like ancient paths lighting up after centuries. Tira turned to him and whispered, "This place feels like a grave." Jace nodded and said, "It is, but not for bodies, for truth." Ship pulsed with a low tone and opened another chamber hidden behind the control wall. Inside stood a platform, and on it a figure appeared, not made of flesh, not machine, but memory light shaped into form. It looked like Jace, but older, taller, its eyes deep and glowing with starfight. Spoke without sound, but they heard it clearly carry the echo of the first. Jace asked, "What does that mean?" The figure showed images in the air, worlds forming, stars singing, fleets moving in harmony across the galaxy. It showed beings tall and bright, shaping planets, guiding life, building great ships that flew without fuel, without flame. Then It showed war dark clouds rising, a being made of silence spreading across systems. Twisting matter into Hathor first fought and fell. They sealed the thing inside this world, using minds linked by blood. The last pilot gave his life and his ship to hold the lock in place. The memory being turned to Jace and said, "You are born of his line." Though Earth forgot your kind, Tira stepped back, stunned, her voice shaking. "You mean he is one of them?" The figure nodded and vanished, leaving only silences. Looked at his hands, the glowing lines now moving as if alive. He said, "I am just a pilot from a broken world. I never asked for this." Tira touched his arm and said, "Maybe that is why the ship chose you, because you never asked before more could be said." The ship flared red, alarms ringing. The pit below pulsed with new lights. Something moved in the dark. The enemy had returned, stronger, faster, more aware. The ship closed its outer plates and lifted higher, drawing energy from the stars above. Jace returned to the main seat. The ship responded to his thoughts, unfolding shields and weapons, not to destroy but to block, to hold. Dozens of twisted forms rose from the pit, flying with shapes that changed every second. Claws, eyes, wings, all shifting like nightmares, with no fixed shape. Tira gasped. The ship shook. The wind from the pit roared like Jace's sent a pulse outward, not a blast, but a wave of thought. It froze the first wave of enemies, giving the ship space to move. He turned to Tira and said, "We cannot hold forever. The ship says we must find the other seal. There is more than one." She asked where. The ship showed a new map, glowing with 3 points, all across different systems. The enemy fired strange beams that bent the air, but the ship dodged with ease, its body folding and stretching through space like liquid thought. Jace aimed for the stars. The ship spun once, then launched upward, breaking orbit and flying past the clouds of shadow. Tira held tight, her eyes locked on the trail of light they left behind. The ship pushed through space faster than before, faster than light itself. Jace's vision blurred with images from the ship, planets, voices, shapes and warnings all flooding into his mind. He saw a world covered in ice, another burning with blue fire, another dark and silent, with only one pulse in its center. He knew then the seals were not just locks, they were wounds, and each one kept something old from bleeding back into the galaxy. The ship spoke again, one line, one thought. "Your blood remembers the path," Tira said quietly. "Then we follow where it leads ahead." The stars formed a gate, not physical, but real, made of gravity and memory. The ship passed through it, like mist. They arrived in a new system, darker, colder, but calm. Jace looked ahead and whispered, "This is the next wound." Ship slowed, then stopped above a quiet planet, where no light moved and no sound echoed. The fight was not over, but they had found the next truth waiting beneath the silence of another forgotten world. The cold planet below held no cities, no lights, no orbiting satellites, only stillness that stretched across its gray surface. Like a frozen breath, untouched and unmoving for what felt like forever. Jace stood at the helm of the ancient ship, its lights dimmed to match the silence. Outside, the lines across his skin, now bright like starlight, pulsing in rhythm with the heart of the vessel. Tira watched from her seat, her fingers gripping the edges of the chair, as she felt the pressure build, not from speed, not from danger, but from something deeper, a kind of memory that did not belong to her. The ship hovered above a narrow canyon carved by time and storm, and hidden deep within was a second seal, a crystal obelisk half buried in rock, glowing faintly with the same light that moved through Jace's body. He stepped forward, and the ship followed his motion, opening a path to the surface, a beam of soft light wrapping around him. As he descended to the ground, Tira stayed behind, watching the ship respond to his presence like a shadow following flame. The chamber walls shimmered with strange shapes, dancing across the surface like echoes of lives long gone. When Jace touched the frozen ground, the seal responded. It awakened with a soundless pulse that shook the canyon walls and lit the sky with streaks of gold. Tira gasped as the planet's crust shifted and cracked, revealing tunnels of light that reached for the stars, and deep below them, something began to stir, something old, something angry. The ship sent a warning through the air, not in words but in emotion, urgency, fear. Dutagus placed both hands on the obelisk and closed his eyes. Images rushed through him. He saw the creators of the seals binding the dark force in the void between worlds, using their own life to lock each gate. He saw one man, last of the first, stepping into the center of the fire, not to destroy the enemy, but to hold it with his own soul. And now the burden had passed to Tira cried out as the sky split open, and the dark shapes returned, more furious, more twisted now, reaching through space to stop what they feared most. The ship dropped to shield Jace, its armor glowing with every memory of every battle it had fought. Before Tira shouted to the ship, "He is not ready," the ship replied, by shifting once more, wrapping itself in energy, forming a bridge between Jace and the stars. Above, Jace opened his eyes, now brighter than ever, and looked up. He said, "It does not matter if I am ready, the time has come." Stepped onto the bridge of light, rising back into the ship, the seal beneath him fading into silence as its purpose passed into him. The ship responded by locking every chamber, sealing its core powering systems that had not stirred in ages from across the stars. More dark forces moved toward them, pulled by the second seals called the ship. Turned to meet them. Jace stood tall, arms outstretched, as the ship aligned to his body, as if it were armor, as if it were a second skin. They flew forward, not to run, not to hide, but to stand between the enemy and the last seal. The final wound. Tira stood beside Jace, her voice steady, though her heart raced. She said, "If you go, I go." He nodded, and the ship surged. They reached the edge of the galaxy, where time bent and stars grew quiet. There they found the last seal, hidden on a drifting world, wrapped in chains of light forged by the minds of the first. But the chains were breaking. The enemy had arrived. Dozens of shadow ships circled the world, attacking the seal with dark beams that tore the light apart. Jace raised a hand, and the ship dove into battle faster than any eye could follow. It moved not like a fighter, but like a thought. It wrapped itself around the enemy and turned their weapons against them, disabling, not destroying, breaking patterns, not ships. Terra focused the ship's shields over the seal, holding it in place while Jace reached out with the full force of his blood and mind. The ship opened its core, revealing the first flame, the last piece of power left by the creators of the seals. Jace touched it. The flame entered him. He screamed, not in pain but in release. The ship exploded with light brighter than stars. The enemy froze, their shapes unraveling, their forms losing meaning. As the light washed over them, the seal restored itself, the chains reforged, stronger than before. The enemy faded into silences, stood at the center of the core, now part of the ship, now more than human. Tira reached for him, but the ship held her back. He looked at her with soft eyes and said, "I must stay. I am the lock now." Tira cried, but nodded. The ship opened one last path for her, sending her back through the stars. She looked back one last time and whispered, "Thank you." The galaxy would remember the one who flew the first flame, and somewhere in the stars, other ships, long silent, began to hum once more, waiting for the blood that still remembers.